Everybody, welcome back to Musical Journeys, episode number 14. Today I've got somebody I've known for decades with me, Marc Barnette, all the way up here in Nashville, Tennessee today at his place. And we're going to sit down and talk about our crossings along the way in his career and see what all we can come up with. Tell me a little bit about, I've known you since 30 years ago, right. Since Birmingham, and 24 Karat was the band that I was aware of. But as far as being up here in the last 3 decades, what have you done up here for the last 3 decades?
Okay, I went from the days of the big hair bands, the rock era, which I don't have a problem with anymore. Right. And music changed. Right. In the late 80s, it went more to Seattle grunge, it went to heavy metal, it went to hip hop. The messages, I didn't like what was happening. And I'm a singer, so I'm very melodically driven. Right. And rock just got anti-melody. It got much more rhythmic, and it just got into a thing I didn't like. So at the same time rock was kind of changing, country was gaining steam as people like Alabama and Exile. And I loved the harmony. I loved what the writing was about. Right. And I met a guy in Birmingham, a guy named Ron Mueller, who had lived up here for 10 years. Okay. And I sat down once a week. I literally paid him to sit down, show me the craft of this. And he brought me up here, and I just got blown away by what people could do with just an acoustic guitar and a vocal. Right. And I went, this is it. So April Fool's Day, 1988, after coming up, making a couple of trips, finding an apartment, recording 10 songs, I actually decided to move, April Fool's Day. That was a Friday. On Monday, I went to a place called Douglas Corner Cafe. I was the first to sign up at 6 o'clock, and I played at 1:45 in the morning. There were 3 people left in the bar. And I played a song of mine and Ron's about a guy's zipper being open. And there's a guy in the back of the room throwing darts. He says, man, I'm not in the music business, but I like your funny stuff. You got a tape. And I had a tape, but I didn't have a phone number on the tape. It just had, it was cassettes 100 years ago. And it turned out he was roommate with a guy who was working at the tape room at Tree Publishing, which was the biggest publisher. And I see him at another place about 6 months after. And I had, by this time, I'd been playing shows. I did comedy nights. I just kind of I hit the ground running. And really, a lot of people were coming, and they liked what I was doing. And he runs into me, and he says, man, they're trying to find you at Tree. And I said, well, here I am, Well, I had the same name as a banjo player that had been around for years. Actually, there were 5 Marc Barnettes. There were 5 Marc Allens.
I wonder why you had Halen to it.
Yeah, and so anyway, it just got into this thing. It turned out that at Tree Publishing, which was this big conglomerate, there was a meeting with my songs that had worked its way up, and it were being played on the stereo at the vice president's office. Okay. And there was a guy in one of the next offices, a guy named Billy Sherrill, discovered Tammy Wynette and George Jones. He was going to the bathroom, walking down the hall, and he heard this song, and he said, who is that? We said, we don't know, we think it's a banjo player. And it turned out to be my song. Oh, wow. And they cut that on a girl named Shelby Lynn. Okay. So the connection was made the first night in town. But I had the right songs, right time, everything was recorded right. And that was used in a Willie Nelson, Chris Christopherson television movie called Another Pair of Aces. And that was within my first year in town. Wow. And then I had publishing deals. I've become the patron saint of the almost there, I mean, I come in and I got this thing called In Your Face Country Soul, and it's kind of the same T. Graham Brown, Travis Tritt, same kind of bluesy attitude, Leroy Parnell, and I'm getting a lot of attention. I've got a band. I'm playing regularly. I'm opening for like Charlie Daniels and Dan Seals. I'm doing all these big concert openings, and it looks like, okay, here we go, man. Wait till they get a load of me. Right. And all of a sudden, this guy from Oklahoma named Garth Brooks comes in and changes the nature of country music. Right. And so, again, I kind of get knocked out. But over the time, I would have different configurations. So like I reinvent myself. And everybody I'm hanging around that all are hit writers. And I'm in these high-level, really cool people. So I'm almost there, but whatever doesn't happen. I went from being more of an artist, and of course you get 28, 29, you're done. Mm-hmm. So I morphed into a songwriter. Mm-hmm. And I had cuts by John Barry. I had cuts by David Ball. I had cuts on Patty Loveless, and then things happen that you got no control over. The owner of the record company dies.
Right.
You know,
Right.
the singer leaves his record deal for another thing. You get bumped off an album. And I had a publishing deal for 6 years that ran out of money. And I had another deal that was coming together and then got torpedoed by an attorney. And then I ended up being asked by a couple from California, from Irvine, California, Cliff and Bev Nelson, that ran the NSAI group.
Right.
And NSAI is Nashville Songwriters Association International,
Okay.
which I had been involved with since I got here, and I became kind of a mentor. And people would come to me, and they came to me. They were visiting Nashville and said, "Can you come talk to our songwriters group?" Mm-hmm. And I'm like, "What, about how to fail with the music business?" Yeah, I can tell you about every way you can fail. But actually, they allowed me to come to California and start going to NSAI groups. And there's 110 of them around the world. And so I've been to about 70 of them. And I would go out, I would do workshops, and I would do private appointments and critiques. And I kept going back and forth. And then all over to New York, I went all over the country. And then I was going out, and a lot of people sit down with you and you listen to their songs and they go, "What can I do?" Well, sometimes not much, because the song's just not there. The idea's not there.
Right.
And they came up with an idea for me, and they called it a write-up songwriting lesson. And what a write-up is, that's a term we use here. You're writing with somebody better. It'd be, if you're a musician, you go and you're hanging around bands and you're older people and you're learning from them how the techniques and things. Well, I had every kind of technique trick that I'd learned from, I've written with 50 number one writers or top 10 writers, and I had learned all these cool little things about how to do it.
Right.
And so I could sit down with people, and in a couple of hours I could come up with a song out of nothing, and it'd be one of the better songs they had written, and it helped them advance. And it's also like teaching a person to fish. You show them all these little tips and these little tricks that they learn, and it speeds up their focus. And where most songwriters, they're all over the place, helps them concentrate.
Right.
Well, when you come into Nashville, it's a co-writer's town.
Right.
It's who you're writing with.
Right.
And so I also showed people some of the things to do, networking, how things on performance, all the things that I'd done my whole life that people came to me on. I just kind of showed them little things, and it had the effect of going to take a golf lesson or a guitar lesson or sports lesson, where it just sharpened the focus.
Right.
And that's what's helped people go faster. In the case of somebody like Frankie Ballard, who was just a guy out of Michigan trying to learn how to write songs, great guitar player, but never really written songs. And we sat down and started writing songs 6 months after he started working with me, coming in from Nashville, come from Michigan, coming into Nashville and going back. 6 months after he did that, signed a publishing deal with now Sony, which was Tree, same publishing company that I'd been working with.
Right.
And then he got a deal with Warner Brothers as an artist, went on tour with Taylor Swift, and the rest is history.
Right.
So it's been like that, and I've worked with about 3,500 people worldwide. I've gone to workshops in Canada. I've gone to Belgium. I've gone to all over, and I've kind of developed my own little niche, which is I'm just passing on the information. But I still write songs. I perform songs. I do gigs and do interviews.
You're still, yeah. Well, you're still you're mentoring.
That's it. That's it. Yeah.
And that's sort of part of the show.
Sure.
Show idea.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I do, though, is I always go back to the very beginning, and I start from your very beginnings of where music, inspires you, what got you going. What was the thing that got you started? I mean, was it your family? Was it a single event or something crazy?
Kind of crazy. When I was in the 8th grade, this is going to sound stupid, but when I was in the 8th grade, we had a thing in those days. You had a thing called shop.
Okay.
It was a class.
Yeah,
right?
shop
And
class.
you had wood shop or mechanic. Well, we didn't do much in our shop class in Tarrant School. We didn't do much. Yeah. But we dismantled this car. Okay, that's what we did. We took this car apart, and all that was left was a seat, just a front seat. And so we didn't really have anything to do, and there was about 7 or 8 of us in this club. So we sat around in this seat, and we started doo-wopping, just singing a cappella songs. At that time, I didn't really know much about my music. My dad had been a gospel quartet singer in the 50s and the 60s. I didn't really know much about it.
Right.
But one guy in my shop class, a guy named Ray Parker, he said, "Man, this is kind of cool." Well, I ended up going to Mountain Brook Junior High School. Okay. I kind of was not the best student in the world. And my mother thought that a year with my father in Mountain Brook would do me good. So I go to Mount Brook and I live there. And sure enough, 1973, Christmas Eve, Ray Parker calls me up and says, we're putting this band together. I said, well, you're barking up the wrong tree because I'm not a singer. Sure enough, he kind of pulled me in. And on March 17th, 1974, I stepped on stage the first time at Tarrant High School, and women went crazy. And I said, I'm in! That's how I got into it. And from there, it was this guy Ray and I formed a band called Bittersweet with a guy named Barry Dobbins.
How old were you then?
I was about, I guess, we were 15, 16, I think.
Right,
it was about that. Freshman year,
right?
And it was just a way to meet girls. And then we became the kings of skating rinks in Birmingham.
Right.
And then we morphed into playing Morris Avenue and playing all the little things. And
Morris Avenue, this is funny because I said this to you. There's a place called Eclectic Theater that I played at when I was a kid. I think it was all ages.
Right. Yeah, it was all ages. Right.
Okay, so you guys played there later on, 24 Karat.
Yep.
And I saw you there. And it was a cool little place.
Yeah.
But Morris Avenue, go ahead.
That was it. Well, no, we played all these things, but it had to be all ages because we're too young to play clubs.
Right.
And we would end up, as we grow, we went from 16 to 18, 19. We went about 5 years with this. And the band grew in our little Birmingham area. Bittersweet. It was first Bittersweet Blues Band, but we didn't do any blues. Okay. So we dropped the blues band. It was just Bittersweet.
And you're doing what kind of material?
It was kind of, it was a little bit of Doobie Brothers. It was a little bit of Eagles-ish, and heavily Kiss.
Oh,
we used flash pots there. As a matter of fact, I would dress in all white.
Oh, yeah.
And one time I stepped back too close to a flash pot, which went off, and it left a black streak behind it, and so I became a reverse skunk, But
it burned you.
Yeah, it burned you. That's exactly right. And that was the band. One night we're playing 1980. Yeah, 1980. We played at a place called Flanagan's, which is in Village East. Okay. And that became kind of a band hangout. And a guy named Jesse Lewis came out to see us and brought with him a guy named Johnny Sandlin. And Johnny Sandlin was the engineer for the Allman Brothers.
I remember that name. He just passed away.
He just passed away.
Yeah.
But they were coming to see us because of a friend of theirs that ran a studio. Said, you ought to go see these guys. And so Jesse, this tall, very attractive African-American, pulls me over and says, you need to fire the guitar player in the band. You need to sing, because they're playing bass at that time. Okay. Says, you need to sing, you need to get me in, and we'll make this a real band. That was my first meeting, and he was absolutely right.
Well, yeah.
Because he took us into, he was older than us. He was a couple of years older than us. And he was a tremendous guitar player, but he's a great businessman. Right. He's a great businessman. Right. And he knew how to package something. Right. And so we went from rehearsing. We always rehearsed most every night, 4 or 5 nights a week, to real serious rehearsal and serious writing songs. Right. We had written songs before, but they were all really kind of crappy. So. Right. And the songs that we wrote with the band became really more credible songs. Still a lot of crap, because the rock of that day, we're talking early 80s, talking Loverboy Journey, we're talking about Styx, we're talking about Boston, Foreigner, that was in that vein. Baby, 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 lead singer with the pants that are real tight, that was me, and guitar player, keyboard player, drummer, and we really charged ahead.
Yance
Hall. Craig? Barry Dobbins at first from Bittersweet, and Ray. Ray joined the original 24 Karat, but he had always been the leader, and he and Jesse kind of locked heads, and he decided that it wasn't going to happen. Okay. So he dropped out. But we kept a couple of the songs that he had written, and the way, bands, somebody brings in a groove, somebody else writes it. He had written this one song called Stay With Me. Mm-hmm. And so we recorded in Atlanta, and we got into this thing called the Miller High Life Rock to Riches National Championships, 1984. And it was a 4-year contest. It had gone from 81. First runner-up was a group called Twisted Sister. 1982, first runner-up was a group called John Bon Jovi. And then 83 was a group called John Butcher Axis, and then we were in 84. First runners-up always did really well. The winners did nothing. They got a big bang there for a little bit, and then, boy, they're done. And as funny, even today, I have a girl I worked with who was a first runner-up on The Voice. Yeah. And when she finished The Voice, she went a couple of weeks after, and she wanted some video footage from that. And they said, once it's over, it's over.
Right.
And that's the contest.
Right.
And so we went on, and 24 Karat did pretty well in the Southeast. And then we had a point where we had to make a decision to move to Los Angeles or stay in Birmingham. Jesse was a very political guy and also involved with his family's business.
Is it law?
It was advertising. Okay. It was advertising, and they owned a black-owned newspaper and an advertising agency. And he was a family business. He was really being groomed for politics. Right. Is what he was going into. Right. And he would have been great at it, but he was killed in a car wreck. Right. But the band just kind of did what all bands do. They dissipate. Do you know when bands break up? When? The day after the photo is taken. That's when they break up.
Right.
And so the band dissipated, and everybody went their own way. I started playing acoustically, and that's when I met the guy Ron Muir, and that's when morphed me into.
So one of the things that's really funny about your rags to riches thing was that the contract that you got a record contract, right?
Yeah.
Well, that record contract.
Indentured servitude, I believe.
Okay, yeah, well, that record contract was copied and was handed at some point to Jamie Robertson,
right.
Which I and the band all had copies of.
Yeah.
And we tried to study this thing. Yeah. Well, we were trying to work on a record deal because we wanted to know what we were getting into. Yeah. And it was such legalese that I couldn't.
Yeah, it is all legalese. And basically, you got to look at anything that you're doing in the music business. Somebody is lending you money, lending you credibility. And it's just the same as a bank.
Right.
The interest rates are really, really high. and you're going to end up, we've got mutual friends, Mark Phillips and a group hotel. They had a record deal in the 70s. And up until just a few years ago, they still were paying that deal off. And so you're loaned a lot of money, and you have a lot of pressure. You have a lot of people that everybody's got their hand out, and you're still nobody.
Right.
And I can't tell you the amount of people that I've known that have been on the road and had to declare bankruptcy because they might have a number one song, but they still owe so much out there. And the record companies look at it like, if you want to talk to us, we're the ones with the political muscle. So it's a decision you have to make, but everybody has to make it.
What's funny is I just read this book on Van Halen.
Yeah.
And for 2 years, they were underneath that Warner Brothers contract. They were bringing $87 a week home.
Yeah.
And until they were able to slip out of that contract by their manager making it happen.
That's right. Yeah.
They weren't able to after 2 successful platinum records.
Right.
They're still not making any money.
That's right. Yeah.
And when he was able to change the terms, they became millionaires.
That's right. Yeah.
Literally over.
It's all about renegotiation, but in order to get to a point where you're renegotiating, you have to deliver.
Right.
And you have to deliver sales. You have to deliver people, and too many people forget that side.
Right.
They want to be the artist. They want to be the writer. They want to get their promotions. No, this is a business.
Right.
And so you have to understand that going in. You have to kind of understand it's the business of music.
Right.
And as we're developing as artists and writers, we're more into the music. Sure. And here's the business.
Sure.
But once you get you're going to have to, we hate to say it, pay to play, but that's what you deal with.
Right.
And your decision as a writer or an artist or a publisher or a producer or whatever you are, your decision is what is your point that you just say no. And I've known people that walked away from really, really good deals.
Right.
The night before, when we were in Los Angeles, the whole way the contest works is 30,000 bands across the country, and the top 5 get flown to Los Angeles. And the night before, we met with a publisher who offered us a really nice chunk of money. We heard from representatives from 4 record companies that were all interested in us. The moment we won, we were indebted to MCA Records, and all the other deals were off. Now, about 15 years later, I'm playing in Nashville. In walks John Bon Jovi. Mm-hmm. And so I'm playing, and I make this little comment about it. I'm watching him, and he gets this grin from ear to ear over it. And so I finished my little thing. He waves me. I was trying to sit down. He said, "Got you on that, didn't I?" I said, Yeah, they did. He had arranged it. They saw that contract, and he already had a deal on the table with Mercury Polygram. So they arranged that they would not win. They would come in second.
Oh, wow.
We could have done the same thing, but we didn't. Thanks, Jesse. But, that's the things happen, man. You get into it. You go into a casino, you put money down, and sometimes you win, sometimes you lose.
Wow, that's just crazy. Some of the stories that happen and things that happen. It's just amazing.
Yeah.
So the songwriting thing, when you came here and you started to do all that, I mean, you were writing these. I thought you said they weren't great songs, but the songs that we recorded, were your songs. Yeah. They were great songs to me, and everybody that we played them for loved them. And like a lot of stories, they get on the desk and timing kills it.
Yeah.
But as far as your development, you said you worked with a lot of different people. You came into town. You luckily had some breaks in that. Your process in writing songs, is it always co-writes or your personal process with that?
95% are co-writes. Now, if you grow up in the rock era, it's somebody, you're rehearsing, somebody brings a piece of a song, a guitar thing. Yance would bring in these continuous keyboards, and basically rock music is basically written around the grooves, around the feel, all of that. Country music written more of a lyric oriented.
Right. So when you were in 24 Karat, would you have music first, then write?
Yes. Everybody would play. We'd go over the same song over and over and over again, and I would da lyrics. Right. You get up and you just sing into improv lyrics. Right. Every once in a while, a word here, a word there. And then the lyrics will be last to be written. And I would sit down, usually myself and Jesse, but mostly me. I would be, as I got into writing lyrics. That's why I can say what I did was a lot of crap. At the time, it was, and I heard recently, he sent me a video of the song that they did, which that wasn't too bad. Right. But lyrically, when you move into a town that is lyric focused, which is Nashville, then you have to look at everything in a much different thing. And you have to look at it like the industry does. The industry are people that have been around years and years and years and seen all of this stuff going on. So they're looking at, okay, this is going to work or this is not going to work. At that time when you're developing, you don't really see that. Right. Now I've got hindsight. And so what I was doing with the band, I'm doing co-writing anyway. Right. So I moved into this town, which is a definite co-writing town. There's almost no single written songs. Right. And it's also, you're writing for two reasons. The first of all, you're writing for the craft and to share things. The other is purely political, because somebody knows somebody that you don't know. Somebody is better connected. Sure. Somebody does something you don't do. Right. Right. And so I developed this skill. I kind of had an improv skill anyway. I could make things up very quickly. Right. And so what Nashville's taught me to do is make them up very quickly, but do it with a very intense abilities, that it makes sense, that the whole story comes together, and people get it immediately in about 3 minutes. Right. That's a very difficult skill. Yeah, it is. And I've written, since 2003, I've written 3,185 songs. Wow. And so I've written tons of songs. And the way that the write-up things that I would do is I get in and I got a 2-hour appointment, and sometimes I've had 3-4 a day. So it's boom, 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 boom. Well, you move into this place, and if you're writing for a publishing company, you're doing exactly the same thing. Mm-hmm. You're getting together with somebody at 10 o'clock in the morning. You got to 10 till about 12:30, 1 o'clock. Take a little break, then you're in another one. And then some people do 3 a day. Most of the writers here, the hit writers, successful writers, are doing 3 a day. Boom, 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 boom. Wow. And it's a job every day. That's crazy. So, as far as, I guess, the questions at the end that I always ask, the music business, since you've been in it 40 years right now, describe your feelings about the music business in one word. You can do that. Disappointing! One word is really hard to. I like a phrase. It's the best of times and the worst of times. Okay. The best of times, if you are a performer, you literally have an endless array of things to get music out there. Right. You've got the internet, and everybody can be literally everywhere. Right. Worst of times, trying to figure out how to get paid for it is really a tough one. And, it's just, you got a lot of things out there. So that segues me into the other question, is the state of the music business today. Yeah. There's a lot of talk about, well, you heard Gene Simmons say, rock is dead. Yeah. How do you, is it just morphing all the time? Mm-hmm. Or how do you feel about things like Spotify
obviously songwriters are getting killed on this whole deal, and it's a big deal.
It is.
So, what do you think is the solution, and what do you think of the state of music as it is today?
Well, you can't put endless supply into the pipeline. And endless writers, 30 to 60 million writers, 1 billion songs a month. You can't put that kind of people into it and expect the same kind of return on investment anymore. We're in a world of niching. All right. You find your little niche and you grow that niche. Taylor Swift, there's a niche. All right. Lady Gaga, there's a niche. They've been able to successfully grow that niche, and we're into celebrity branding. Right. It's not about the song. It's not about one thing. It's about Kenny Chesney doing his beach kind of stuff, expanding into the Jimmy Buffett market and taking over the world, where he has the summer extravaganza.
Right.
All right. And we're all in niching.
He ties it in all the different things. Yeah. So the branding and building out from that, that opportunity that creates for somebody like a Faith Hill or whoever, they can do other things to make money outside of songwriting royalty. I mean, Gaga, she's done a lot of that.
Right.
So do you see that as kind of the new thing, to start out with your songs and then promote to a point where you can get into other parts of the business to,
Well, see, I don't think it's anything new.
True.
All right. You can go back into the 1920s, and Al Jolson, he became a brand. He was a movie star as well as a singer on vaudeville. He had all the little Al Jolson songbooks and all that stuff. And you go up to Elvis and the Beatles, those merchandising monsters, man.
Right. Still are.
So they still are. That's exactly right.
Still are.
So you're doing that. From a songwriter's perspective, one of the most interesting things and the eye-opening things that I found out when I moved to Nashville, because I suddenly was writing with these guys with gold and platinum records everywhere. I'm writing with hit monster, and you think, boy, they're taken care of for life. And time after time, I'd be in these writing sessions. They say a phone would ring, and they go, I got to take this, and then they'd have to stop the writing session because they had to go deliver supplies for their plumbing contracting business. They had to go show property for their property management business. The deal is, music business goes up and down. You might take you 10 to 15 years, kind of like athletes. It takes about 10 years to get in a position. That's what we call a 10-year town. And then suddenly you might have hit after hit. Well, those end after a while and you're back down. So I found that a lot of people that would move to town and they have skills like electrical contractors or plumbing, they never lose those businesses. They keep those business, they subcontract that business out and they still run it. That way when it comes down, boy, they move into something else. People like myself, I'm morphed into the teaching thing. I still write songs. I still get cuts. I got a cut yesterday, and I still get people cut. But the cuts now, you got stuff like Wrecking Ball from Miley Cyrus that gets on Spotify. It is streamed 200 million times, paid less than $10,000. So you've got the goalpost that gets shifted. All right, now it's no longer 1 million streams to make $10. It's 10 million streams. And as we get, and I got a device right over there. It's one of these little, you say Alexa, and it'll play any song in the world. How are you ever going to keep track of that? Right. There's millions of songs on. See, it's on.
Right.
Alexa, stop. And so it gets nuts at how much people have more. They have more recording studio power on this. Alexa, stop. More power on this. You got recording studios, and people they can get music any way. And how are you going to keep track of that? There's no physical way to keep track of it.
Right. There's all this talk about net neutrality.
Yeah.
You know about that, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, what I always thought about the music business was that they didn't respond. Well, Steve Jobs responded and took the business.
Yeah.
And the record companies kind of stayed in their same headspace about how they were going to run their businesses. So it's kind of like, what's the next thing that's going to happen? How are we, like the songwriters, there's just been whole talk about going to Congress, getting, all that somehow straightened out.
Yeah.
Do you think that's going to happen?
No, you can't put a genie back in the bottle.
Right.
I went to Congress in 2006, and you ask anybody under the age of 30 about paying for music, and they look at you like you were insane. get music free. It's the inline consumer has now found a way to get endless music for free. They're not going to pay out for it. We're in our third generation of people.
Right.
I sat in a meeting, a very high level meeting in 1998, and that was the top publishing companies, record companies, ASCAP, BMI, CSAC, producers, and two guys were tech guys. So they were talking about this new thing that was coming called the interweb. Right. The interweb was going to come, and we're going to be able to get our music everywhere.
Right.
All right. And I'm sitting with every major writer in Nashville, about 300 people in this very tight little room. And it was the stuff that was about to be coming and what we needed to be aware of. Toward the end, one of the tech guys goes, in the future, songwriters are going to have to do without royalties because they aren't going to be there anymore. I'm sitting next to one of the biggest writers in town. He goes, how will a writer make a living? He said, you won't. And sure enough, right after that, every hit writer started developing their own acts. They started developing their own artists.
Right.
All right. And you would have people in development, and essentially it morphed from the record labels doing everything to developing. Suddenly the publishers and the hit writers were developing, and they got everything. You get Craig Wiseman, Florida Georgia Line.
Right.
He's got part of the management, part of the publishing, part of the branding.
360 deal.
360 deal. That's where it came from. American Idol comes in. You want a deal. We're losing revenue on the sale of songs. So we're going to get your T-shirts, your merchandising. We're going to get everything.
Where you can.
There's the deal. Take it or leave it. Right. Same kind of contract that was back in that thing in the Miller Rock to Riches that you looked at. Right. That's the same deal.
Right.
You own by I owe my soul to the company store, and that's exactly what it is. Right. And you just have to decide. Now we're in a different age now in that people who are doing this very well. And you look at Taylor Swift, you look at Justin Bieber, they had enormous fan followings before record labels were interested in it.
Right.
So you get a situation where you truly can kind of engineer your own future. You don't need the record labels like you used to. Yeah. You set up your own record label. There's a point, like everything, that you have to be in a higher bracket.
So you do, like a Meghan Trainor who came sort of from the YouTube thing.
Yep.
Right. And then she morphed into the big time.
That's exactly right.
So
her first number one song was another guy I worked with, Lance Carpenter. So yes, I have a connection with all of them. Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah. So I mean, she sort of had her base.
That's right.
And then they came to her,
mm-hmm.
and then I guess at that point they have to be smart about what they're going to do in their deal.
Yeah. They put a company, Black Creek, around her and some writers, and we've got a lot of these in Nashville now. We've got a lot of small companies that are put. Taylor Swift is the ultimate. They put a company around her.
Big Machine.
Big Machine. It was called Big Machine because everybody turned her down and said, you won't get anywhere without the Nashville Big Machine. Well, they became the Big Machine.
Okay.
And she just developed because she spoke to her generation. Right. And she did something very interesting. I've seen it happen twice. I saw it happen with Garth, where he came in with the big rock energy and the big shows that expanded what country music, expanded the demographic of country music. Well, Taylor Swift comes in and she speaks to a generation and expanded the demographic.
Right.
Traditionally, the demographic of country music was 22 years old to about 45 years old. 70.
What era?
This is all throughout country music. All right. And it's 70% female. Well, she expanded it to 14 years old to 65 years old. Wow. 70% female. And she was very attractive. There's an endless amount of girls that are very attractive. Right. She just said things, and I met her. Another one I met when she was 15, and she came over, and it was like, God, there's another 15-year-old. I had just written with 3 14-year-olds and their mother, so I had no interest in doing that. And sure enough, she's just a sweet little girl. At the same party I met her, there were probably 70 other mother-daughter combinations walking around, the momingers that we call, we walk around, these 15-year-old girls. They all look the same. She was very attractive, but very polite. And you just got a sense of that's kind of a different kind of deal. Right. And sure enough, she came out and just blew everybody away. Wow. And she just created this world around her. And she's $1 billion industry now. Garth did it in country 20 years ago.
I was going to say something about Garth that I wanted to ask you. okay, you said he expanded country music with the rock sense.
The big stage shows.
So, and this is interesting to me. Shania Twain with Mutt Lange.
Right.
Do you think she just carried on with Garth?
Yes.
And then pushed it even further.
Exactly. Yeah.
Because I mean, I from what all I know, they weren't very happy about Mutt Lange in this town initially. At least I don't know. Now maybe they are because it's such. How much of what that happened is so much of what you
well,
today.
it's interesting. I got personal connections to other stuff because a woman who helped put that deal together with Mercury Polygram was also a big fan of mine. See, there were a bunch of people trying to sign me in town and get me signed. Mm-hmm. And I get very, very close, but it never worked out. But this woman came to me at a party. She said, "We're doing this thing with Shania Twain." Now, I knew Shania Twain because I had the same bass player as she does. Okay. And what my bass player was saying was going, well, she's good, but she can't sing that well. And she's good looking, but there's a million good looking girls. Well, she actually had a record before that. It just didn't do, she's flatlining. Right. Well, she meets Matt at a fanfare, Mutt at a fanfare, and Mutt says they should produce you the way you should be produced. And it was just a meeting. And he brought that Def Leppard drum sound and he coupled it with bluegrass. Right. And the first song, Any Man of Mine, that's boom, boom.
Right. Sure.
And then it kicks into a chorus, Any Man of Mine. Right. And it coupled two things. And when you got somebody that looks like that, she actually sang pretty damn well. Right. And so it just was the right place, right time. You can't plan that. You can put all these elements around. Right. And you know what? Most of those songs on her first huge album, she had written years before. Right. And the record label turned them down. Right. So you have that happen continuously. Everybody has these stories of, came that close, I should have signed them, because everybody gets turned down. Right. Garth was turned down 19 times by record labels. He was signed after he played the Bluebird. He played the Bluebird, and the guy that turned him down that day saw him that night. And I was standing outside. I was standing outside the window when I saw that. Wow. And he was electric. It was something about him just by himself. It was just extraordinary to watch.
Yeah, that's funny because then that story about Garth spins off into the Martina McBride story. Yeah, she was working for him. Yeah, and her husband John, who I have sort of a loose relationship with. And then a whole nother era. Of females with Faith and Martina.
Faith singing backup for one of the best songwriters in town, Gary Burr. Okay, and the guy comes to the Bluebird, sees Faith, and signs Faith instead of Gary. Wow. And Gary replaced Vince Gill in Pure Prairie League. Hey, see how all this works? And now where is Vince? Singing with the Eagles. God.
That's a good gig.
What a funny business. And that's the thing about the business. You cannot predict it. You can't do anything. You can put all of these pieces together, and it's flog and hope. You hope it works. Right. Most times it doesn't, but sometimes it works, and it works great.
So for advice for younger musicians, obviously this is something you're doing. Yeah. More in the songwriting realm, but is it just general advice for up-and-coming songwriters or musicians? Mm-hmm. Because, obviously you came from the rock side, and you did that whole thing, band thing. What would you say? It's just as crazy as it is, but is there any advice that you would give just to be?
You don't have long enough. Right. Number one, avoid negativity. All right. Songwriters, and we get about 100 people a day trying to move into this town or have something. 600 people a week trying to come here. Right. And there's already about 250,000 people trying to do music. The music business employs 4,600 people. All right. So it is everybody's coming here. So most songwriters write what they say, what they feel. They'll write things. They wake up and the world is depressing and they watch news and it's all terrible. And they're all breaking up all the time. Every songwriter, every artist can't keep a relationship for crap. And so they're going to write negative. And so once you hear, I got two different types of music. ACSS, Angry Chick Singer Syndrome. That's where they're all pissed off about the guys. Or DDSS, Depressed Dude Singer Syndrome, where they're all depressed because they screwed the girl up. All right. So if you will avoid being negative, you're ahead of what most people are. You want to hit people in the heart, the mind, the gut. You want to hit people in the heart that it moves them emotionally, but also the mind that makes them think, and then that gut, that just feeling. And a lot of that is groove and feel. You want to make sure you have feel in what you're doing, all right? Then you got to stay away from writing what's on the radio. That's already on the radio. It was written 5 years ago, and it just got the last couple of years on there. Right. And if you think people were tired of bro country now, you should have been here 2 years before it actually hit the charts of Florida-Georgia line. We were sick of trucks, and we were sick of the short shorts and the girls out in the field. Good. Well, of course, I was doing that with Big Kenny of Big and Rich. You know, people go, who goes out with all these in the fields with the trucks and the girls and the cooler? Me and Big Kenny. That's exactly what we did. So, but, you know, you write what you see, but you got to try and find a way to spin it positive. You got to find a way not to be so negative. Right. People see every day the depression that goes on. God, we're in this political world that just everything sucks. Yeah. So don't do that.
Right. So, you know, that taking a positive spin and as far as the, you know, up and comers, say, you know, you got a young Meghan Trainor.
Yeah.
You know, what would you tell somebody besides obviously being positive? Because she's pretty positive.
Yes, very.
And it speaks because, you know, this is people's way of getting away from that. You know, it's their release from the
that's right.
The negativity, right? And that's what you're saying. So as far as any other advice for somebody coming up like that, besides that, what else would you say? I mean, you got the 10,000 hours thing. You've got to just crank it.
Yeah.
Work ethic stuff.
Write a lot of songs. You know, the people that get 5 or 6 songs and they come in, they think they've written an opus. No, you're just beginning. You don't even get started, right? We've got 100-song rule here. Yeah, you haven't even started until you've written at least 100 songs. Right. And you got to write with other people. You got to work well with others. So you better practice your political skills. And by that, I mean being polite and being nice and getting people to invite you in. Right. Because everything's about somebody inviting you in.
Right.
And so you better write well to get attention. There are 4 things you got to be concerned with: creation of the song, presentation of the song, networking, and business. And you got to be aware of all of those things. Right. But if you don't do the first 3, if you don't create interesting things that gets and keeps people's attention, you know, the hardest thing that we're having to do these days, get people to put this down.
Sure.
You know, I have things that I call glow songs. Glow songs are where a song gets so boring or just like everything else, everybody's picking their phones up and you see the glow in their faces as they're going through it. You just want to watch an audience. What's the glow songs? Yeah. People tune out. Yeah. So you create interesting thing that gets and keeps people's attention. You present it every time you perform or every time it is performed on recording, on YouTube, on whatever. It sounds and looks great because how many chances you get to make a bad first impression? 1. And so you want to put your best foot forward. And then networking. And networking is meeting friends. Sure. Making friends. Just duh.
Yeah, right.
Be a nice guy. Then you see where the business is going to go. And the business, this is to your other thing, the business is not always about financial things. It's about where does it move you? Where does it get you into people's things? Getting a YouTube video that goes up and it gets 1,000 people who love it and are willing to come out and see you play or go to your website. I played last night, and I had 12 people today contacting me about the songs that I played last night. Awesome. And that sends them directly to my website. And so that's where the financial stuff comes from.
Sure. So you feel like this is something that I have a discussion about a lot is, you know, some people say, well, Sammy Hagar wrote a song about he would do it for free. Mm-hmm. I mean, you don't always look, I mean, most of us don't. We don't start out with that. Like you said, a lot of the problems that we encounter with business is that we don't really think about the financials.
That's right.
So, I mean, you know, you're talking about when you have these relationships with people, sometimes it just by doing the things that you're talking about, the financial kind of works itself out. You do need to be aware of the pitfalls. Yeah. But you also need to have some degree of, you know, not so much concern with that.
I have never...
I mean, you know, people always say, you've got in the wrong business if you're going to make money.
That's right.
I mean, that's...
I hear that
every time.
They come to me going, well, I don't want to be rich and famous. I go, well, you picked the right business for it. Yeah, that's very good. I've never met a hit writer that you say, why'd you get into this? And I said, well, to make a fortune. Right. Never ever met. And these people have made fortunes.
Right.
No, I wanted to get what was inside of me out with as many people as possible. Right. If you do that and do it consistently, then usually the business will follow you. It might not be the business that you anticipated. I can tell you number one writers, number one producers, publishers that all wanted to be the artist. Sure. And that didn't work for them. So they had to morph into something. I didn't want to sit around and talk about teaching songs. I wanted to be performing songs. Sure. And I'm still damn good at it.
Right.
But I just saw a need. There were people that were spending fortunes. I've seen so many people that come sit down with me, and they spent $80,000, $100,000 on songs they can't do anything with. Because nobody sat with them and said, you really need to rethink this.
Right.
We call them vanity projects. Sure, people that come in and, here, I got a Grammy Award-winning producer, and I'm going to sound great. Well, we also call that freelance deprecation dusting. That's polishing a you-know-what.
Yeah, right.
And we can, in Nashville, we got the greatest musicians in the world. We can make anything sound good. Right. Whether you should be doing it's another matter completely.
Right. So,
Yeah.
So the mentoring thing, just to finish up, I mean, I see a lot of this. This is something that I picked up on from an engineering show on YouTube. Yeah. And there seems to be, this is going back to your talk about negativity, a disenfranchising with the media in its current form, just because it's so negative.
Yeah.
But what I do see is that now you've got personal, opportunity in the YouTube realm to create something like you're doing. Yeah. To mentor, to be a resource, but also to connect to different opportunities that you never even.
Yeah.
Like for me, doing this show wasn't really something that I considered initially.
Right.
I'm like you, a performer. That's what I love to do. And but as I saw an opportunity to interface with other people like yourself, it became like, wow, this is something cool, and you're doing the same thing with your musings on your page on Facebook. Tell them about what you do with that.
Well, I do. I do about 5 different.
And how they can contact you.
Yeah, that's www.marcallen, MarcAllenBarnette.com. MarcAllenBarnette.com. And I also am on Facebook, and that's one of the things that have been around. I call them Mab's Musings. And I also have a thing on my website called Mab Blog. Anything's Mab. Marc Allen Barnett, Mab. And so I put all kinds of different things depending on what people talk. I get people all the time privately, email, text. This happened to me today. And so that's what I will do.
So it's a response.
It's a response, yeah.
Things that you...
And I do websites, BMI, Songwriter 101. I'm on that. Songramp.com, I'm on that. Just Plain Folks, I'm on that. All of those are websites that people, if you're going to be a songwriter or a singer, you should join some of these websites. And usually what you find is one will lead you to another.
Sure.
My biggest thing that I try to preach is the one thing that cannot be replaced by the internet, by technological stuff, is the one-on-one interaction that we all have. Sure. That's why I think that songwriters make a mistake when they're trying to depend on the internet to do everything for you. There's 1 billion communications a day on the internet. You can get lost really, really quick. Sure. But you build a connection, a solid face-to-face connection with 10, 100, 500, 1,000 people, you got a career. Because they come see you, they follow what you do, they buy your product, they buy your hats, your merchandising. That's where a career comes from.
Sure.
And you need to concentrate on those people. Let the rest of the world take care of itself. Because if you do what you do well, they'll come to you.
Sure.
And one of the things that I did with Frankie, and then I do with a lot of people that come up and they're trying to decide whether to move to Nashville, don't dive in until you really have to. Keep your home crowd. Keep your home. Frankie he had a huge following in the Midwest long before he moved here.
Right.
And so he had he's opening for Bob Seger and Kid Rock. You really need Nashville? No, Nashville needs you.
Right.
And that's why Nashville went after him, because he was really doing great outside of Nashville.
Sure.
And the first thing that you come here with a record company and you sit down with a record company, they go, where's your fan base?
Sure.
We don't want somebody else just sitting in Nashville waiting for us to do something.
Right.
You better be out there doing something.
A whole bringing. But, I think, even going back to the 70s, I had mentioned Van Halen earlier. They built their following in their hometown.
That's exactly right.
Thousands and thousands of kids coming to see them before they ever had any interest.
And if you look throughout history, I mean, Elvis is on the Louisiana Hayride. The Beatles were at the Cavern Club.
Right.
I mean, it's people. If you want a piece of advice to songwriters and artists, read biographies. Read the people who did this before,
right.
Because it's exactly the same.
Right.
And it's really funny. Frank Sinatra, when he first started playing, one thing his manager did, he went out and he paid girls to come in and sit in the first 2 rows to scream.
Right.
Well, he paid them for about the first scream. From then on, they were screaming and everybody was screaming.
Right.
He didn't have to do it because Sinatra was Sinatra.
Right.
And Elvis was Elvis. And you got to find what motivates people to come see you.
Right.
And if any piece of advice to songwriters or artists, think of your audience. Where is your audience?
Right. I was going to tell you the biography I just saw, documentary I just saw on Clive Davis.
Yeah.
What an amazing story.
Absolutely.
And you said you had the book over there, Wall of Sound, and there's just
Phil Spector.
There's just some amazing stories in the business, and if you go back and do some research, you can find a lot of the answers that we were talking about.
Everything is at your fingertips. Everything is on YouTube.
Yep.
Go to YouTube. Google is your friend. And that's where I learned so much. But I fortunately also have been around. I've been around people who have been there.
Right.
I've been around Grammy Award winners.
Sure.
I've ran around multi-million sellers. A very good friend of mine was Larry Henley, who wrote "Wind Beneath My Wings." And I used to see him toward the end of his life, and he was kind of depressed because how was he ever going to top that? Right.
Right.
And so there's a lot of negative, and you can deal with that, but just try to be as positive as you can.
Cool. Well, man, I appreciate you sitting down with me today and having me here. It's your place, and it's like been a 30 or 40-year journey.
I knew him when he was 3!
For us to even get together. It's so weird to me, but
I'm thrilled to have you.
You know what? The internet made that possible.
That's right.
Because I saw your stuff on there, and I thought, you know what? We're going the same path a little bit here. I think we should sit down and talk about it. So, it's Marc Barnette. Appreciate you hanging out with us for episode 14 of Musical Journeys. See you next time.
Thank you.